Sounds like Cedric Coward is never going to suit up for Duke. So, ho-hum, John Schade just went out and landed a 6'8" Italian wing. No big deal.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Friday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your host. This is my guy, Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We want to thank you for making us your first listen or watch of the day to get your Friday started the only way you should. The right way. I don't know, whatever that way is for you. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Special shout out to all you everydayers who are here with us and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. Andy, going to be a fun show today. Obviously, this time of year, it's a lot of player movement. It's a lot of scheduling, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, that's essentially all of what today's show is. We're going to start with the biggest news of Thursday when Darrion Sarr commits to Duke and what that might tell us about a couple other people. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk some more draft decisions, all of which are players pulling out of the draft, coming back to school, several SEC guys there. And Iowa State rolled out their non-con schedule on Thursday, and maybe they shouldn't. I don't know. We'll talk about why we're skeptical about that. Andy, Darrion Sarr committing to Duke. Quick bio blast, and then we'll get some takes going on this. You'll see him listed anywhere from 6'6" to 6'8", 180-something pounds, or if you read his European bio, it's in kilos or something like that. I can't translate. Andy, he's 18 right now, will be 19 on June 4th. So, he is going to be like of freshman age, whatever. He's an Italian. He's been playing for FC Barcelona over in the Euro League, has been released from that contract, which is something else we're going to have to talk about at some point soon, Andy, is all the conversations between FIBA and the NCAA, but that's for another day. So, Andy, great news for Duke. They land a needed wing. But before we get more into the Darrion Sarr of it all, which it is Dame, folks, not Dame, which I had incorrectly been saying for weeks now, what does this tell us about another potential Duke player?
Yeah, I think it's hard to not see this as some kind of response to the feedback that Cedric Coward has been getting in the NBA draft process. For those who are maybe not as plugged into the NBA draft or the Duke of it all, certainly Cedric Coward's a name that a lot of people don't know all that much about. He only played 6 games last year at Washington State. Prior to that, he was at Eastern Washington, a guy who's been on the draft radar for a while and for a lot of good reasons, but has really popped as of late. He had a tremendous NBA draft combine. His measurements were staggering. He's 6'6" with like a 7'2" wingspan. He's super long. He's a great 3-point shooter. He was at Eastern. He was last year at Wazoo before he got the shoulder injury. An incredibly talented player who has started to vault his way into the first round conversation of the NBA draft process. And as we talked about in an early episode this week, actually we talked about it a couple of times, like Coward's really having a hard time deciding whether he's going to stay in the NBA draft process where he's now starting to get some first round buzz or commit to Duke or go to Duke. He's already committed to Duke out of the transfer portal. And I have a feeling that shortly, it was like right when Coward started to get some real buzz was when we heard the link between Sarr and Duke was kind of picking up steam. They've been connected for a while, but Joe Tipton reports like, oh, it sounds like things are kind of heating up between the two. They're trying to get him on campus. And then now we have this commitment, 6 days as it happened before Coward has to decide whether he's going to stay in the draft process. And I wouldn't say that this is 100% clear that Cedric Coward's not going to Duke, but gosh, it's probably pretty close in the sense that it's Duke covering their bases and making sure that they do have some coverage on the wing in case Coward doesn't come to campus. But also for Coward, like now the playing time that you were guaranteed to get at Duke is now not necessarily there. I think he'd still play a lot, and I think he'd still play probably more than Sarr just by virtue of being older and more experienced. But you got to think that this is a pretty good sign that Coward's next stop is going to be in the NBA rather than being in Durham.
Andy, I think you're absolutely right. I feel no differently than you. only thing I think I would say is I feel like we're more confident in Cedric Coward's decision than he probably is, right? Like, it's like, dude, just go while the going's good. You never know what could happen from injury to falling,
especially with an injury history too.
Yeah. And so, dude, get while the getting's good, man. Like, go be great, do your thing. We'd love to have you in college basketball at one of the premier schools in all of America. But dude, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but it makes sense. So, Andy, then it's interesting because we look at these two players and they do a little bit of different things. And so I think an interesting conversation to have here for us is it feels like it's an either or with Sarr and Coward. It's not a both and, right? And so I think the part of the conversation we need to have here is which one of these players would have most helped Duke? And that's in terms of what they do well and in terms of how each skill set would fit with what Duke has this year. Obviously, this is a different look Duke team than it was last year. They've still got some weapons. They're still going to be very big, maybe not number one big like they were last year. And it's not Malawach's imposing size. It's not Cooper Flagg's do it all, right? But you look at Cam Boozer, and the dude just wins everywhere he goes. You look at Caden Boozer, and he is going to be a great point guard, whether he's the starter or not. You know what? We'll have to see. I think a lot of that will depend on, what other players are doing and stuff, right? But ultimately, how do you see this between Sarr and Coward, and who fits better with this Duke unit?
Yeah, I think they would have liked to have somebody with a little bit more experience, just on a fairly young roster with the Boozers, obviously, and some other young players who are stepping into bigger roles who are kind of buried on the bench last year. But they do have some depth. They do have some experience. They got Malik Brown and obviously Proctor back if he comes back, which we're assuming he will. I think that this is a team that has a lot of talent and a lot of experience. I still think they would have liked to have Coward's, he shot 40% from three in college. He's done that at the collegiate level. Yes, it was 6 games at Wazoo, but he also shot 39.5% from three at Eastern. I do think that the questions about the quality of competition for Coward are there, especially the 6 games at Wazoo were mostly against bi-level opponents, so we didn't really get to see him kind of shine in that space. But Sarr's longer, he's got more upside than Coward, but Coward kind of does a little bit of everything. He's not only a good 3-point shooter, but he's a great rebounder for his size. He's got a ton of length. He's a very good shot blocker, but again, all of that comes with the caveat of having been done against competition that's not as good as the ACC. So it's interesting that both these players are unproven at that level. Sarr, because he's a freshman coming from Europe, and so there's always a little bit of a question mark of how that translates. And Coward, because he's a mid-major transfer who didn't really get to showcase it. Even in the WCC, if he played a full season last year, I think you'd feel a lot better about that, because that means his games would have come against Gonzaga and San Francisco and St. Mary's, but he didn't. He didn't get to face those teams, so there's a big question mark there. Ultimately, I think Coward is probably the better fit for 1 year. If you're assuming you're getting Sarr or Coward for this next season, I think Coward's experience, his age, the fact that he's proven it at this level probably would have made him a better fit on this roster. But Sarr has the much bigger upside. And again, if it's only a year, if he's a 2026 draft pick, then great. I wouldn't be surprised if Sarr is the one who's a better contributor in March, because he develops and plays great. But I think he's a bit more of a risk in the sense that he's just so young. And sometimes these European guys, even ones who are as highly touted as he is, it takes them a little bit of time to get going, whereas I don't think that would have been or would be the case with Coward if he were to end up at Duke.
That's a good word, man. Some of those guys just pop right away and some don't, and it takes some time. And so I'm curious to see how that'll go with Sarr. With Coward, you would probably compare him to some of those great already established veteran pieces that John Shire brought in last year to help surround all the freshmen. I feel like that's a lot of the role he would play. And yes, I think you're right. Sarr had got some buzz, some noise for the 25 draft, but man, going to school for a year in America, especially at Duke, and then being ready for the 26 draft, I think that's makes just a ton of sense for him and is a massive win. Andy, it's funny, at one point, Illinois and Duke were both, in talks with Sarr. Illinois lands Andrei Stojakovic, so they're out, same position. And then once Duke landed Cedric Coward, it seemed like he would be there and Sarr would go to a third school, that wasn't really in conversation, but now obviously we've seen how it's played out. So kind of funny stuff there. Ultimately, this will be, I think, a lot of fun for Duke, and with all the other pieces they bring in, and we'll see what happens. And we wait for that official announcement from Cedric Coward to stay in the draft, but that's probably coming. It has to come by next Wednesday. So we'll see.
Yeah, and like you said, Isaac, we're all the announcements we're getting right now are guys who are deciding to return to school, and that's probably most of the announcements we'll get up until May 28th, and players who don't announce by that point are probably staying in the draft. But we do have some guys who are coming back to college hoops, potentially including the SEC Player of the Year, at least somebody who's going to be firmly in that conversation. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Because between dining out, online shopping, and just general entertainment costs, it's kind of easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. And Monarch Money is not just another budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. And for us, for our family, my wife and I, we always want to make sure that we are on the same page when it comes to our finances, even more important with a 15-month-old in the house. And thankfully, with Monarch Money, managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever before. You can track your shared and personal accounts, set collective goals, and stay on the same page without all the extra added stress and hassle. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com and you'll get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off that first year. All right, folks, we talked about Dame Sarr going to Duke and what that potentially means for Cedric Coward as we await his NBA draft decision. But now we're going to talk about some players who have finalized their decisions. And just as a note, we are recording this on Thursday afternoon. It's for Friday's show, but we're also going to record Monday's show for next week today, as well as we're going to be out of town on Monday. So for that show, we will have as much updates as we have right now, but obviously any changes that happen over the weekend, specifically with draft decisions, we will have that on Tuesday's episode of Locked On College Basketball after the Memorial Day holiday. We're right now, again, it's Thursday, so we're 6 days away from the decision date, the deadline where college basketball players have to announce whether they are staying in the draft process or returning to school. That is on May 28th. And we got a couple of withdrawals that came together the last couple of days here, a lot of them related to the SEC, one of them a big one in the Big 12 we'll get to. But we'll start with Josh Hubbard, Isaac, returning to Mississippi State. This is not a shock. None of these are real shockers. I think the big kind of like 50-50 decisions like Coward and Lendeberg and some of the others we'll hear about later. But these were players that most folks didn't really expect to stay in the draft process. But Hubbard, even if it's not a surprise, it's still really good news for Chris Jans and Mississippi State. He's an incredibly talented player. And as you noted, a guy who could realistically contend to be SEC Player of the Year. He could contend to be an All-American next year, at least like first team All-SEC, like very likely in that mix. And for Coach Jans, I mean, he's going to ride Josh Hubbard to another appearance in the NCAA tournament, I think. And it's a great for college basketball that a player like this is coming back to school. And again, the fact that it wasn't even a surprise, I think is a good sign for the kind of the health of the sport, that these really talented players are opting very regularly to return to school and kind of boost their legacy in college rather than staying in the draft. It's good news for college basketball that Josh Hubbard is back. Unless you are an Ole Miss fan, then maybe you're not so happy about it.
That's a great point. And Andy, it's so interesting how we have these bookends that are the guys that typically come back. It's the bigs that aren't stretch bigs, and it's these guys like an undersized guard like Josh Hubbard, like Mark Sears, like RJ Davis, right? These are the guys that we continually see right now coming back to school. And so it makes sense. An undersized scorer who just it doesn't have a spot in the NBA, most likely. Go get paid, dude. Get what you can while the getting's good. Like we said about Cedric Coward, it just makes sense. Josh Hubbard, cool to have you back. We love this and what it means for our sport. And do we have another SEC player that wasn't in the SEC last year? Hubbard returning to the school he was already at. Jaland Lowe, on the other hand, is returning to school and transferring from Pitt to Kentucky. He had, for those who didn't know this, he had already committed to Kentucky if he came back to school, but he was in the draft process. And as you said with Josh Hubbard, obviously this was another one that's expected, but it's still important for the Cats to get the official word because you never know until you do. Andy, I think the big question is Jaland Lowe does so much well. I mean, gosh, like what he did at Pitt each of these last 2 years, 2 years ago, being teamed up in the backcourt with Bub Carrington. My word, that was a dynamic duo. The thing is, man, he struggles from three. Do you think he can get better in Lexington this year?
I think so. I mean, gosh, he was really, really challenged from beyond the arc last year, 26%. From three. And I think like being the focal point, as you mentioned, he shot much better as a freshman with Carrington in the mix. And I think that gave him some opportunities to do some more catch and shoot stuff because Bob had the ball in his hands. And I think last year Lowe was tasked with having to do more off the dribble, and just we saw his 3-point shooting plummet. Whereas at Kentucky, I do think he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, but that Kentucky offense likes to move the ball around. Defenses are going to be stretched very thin trying to handle him and Cam Williams and Brandon Garrison and Jaden Quaintance, and the list goes on and on and on. And so I think, and especially if Otega Oweh comes back, that's a huge one that we're still waiting on right now. If Oweh comes back to Kentucky, he's going to have the ball in his hands a ton as well. And so I think that opens up the opportunity for Lowe to one of two things: either shoot much better from three, like look much more like the 35% shooter he was as a freshman, or if he's still really struggling even on catch and shoot opportunities, they're just going to have him stop shooting threes. Like they're not reliant on him offensively to the point where a bad 3-point shooter hacking up shots, it's just not going to work. Whether it's hey, we're going to have a conversation about you being more of a drive and dish guy, or, hey, this isn't working, we're going to play Denzel more, or we're going to play Jasper Johnson more, or Colin Chandler more, or, I mean, go down the list. They have a million guards on their rosters, so they have the opportunity to flex some things. And Lowe's a tremendous player, and I think the best case scenario for Kentucky next year is him playing big minutes for this team. I think he's as close to a lock for the starting lineup as you're going to have, especially if Oweh doesn't come back. But yeah, the 3-point shooting is a question, and Mark Pope loves his guys to be able to shoot the rock. So I think that's something that among the handful of kind of questions I have about this roster is who are going to be those knockdown shooters, and who are some guys who maybe, if they're not filling that role, what does that exactly look like for them? Like you said, Lowe does so many other things well. He's still going to fit, but it is a bit of a question mark. Then again, Lamont Butler wasn't considered a great shooter, and he found his role very comfortably in that offense last year. So I'm sure there's a spot, even if Lowe doesn't find that shot.
Man, it's gonna be really interesting. The best teams in this day and age are the guys who can get guys to just come be part of a team, right? You've got, you have teams that have a strong starting five and are maybe weak in depth. But man, Kentucky, as you talked about on yesterday's show, is so deep. Really good stuff there. A couple other names, Andy. Melvin Council, out of the draft from the Bonnies, transferring to Kansas, and Kobe Knox from South Florida to South Carolina. Just want to mention about Council, has scored 14 and a half-ish each year of college so far. A year at Wagner as a freshman, 14.9, and then last year at the Bonnies, 14.6. He's good size, 6'4", 185. Does a little bit of everything, Andy. Last year for the Bonnies, 14.6, 5.4 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 2.1 steals, 81.9 at the free throw line. Dude, stat stuffer galore, man. I love that. The problem and my concern is he's a career 28.3% 3-point shooter, Andy. 29.9 last year, 26.5 at Wagner. And we know the struggles Kansas has had from deep the past couple of years, in particular with transfers coming in. And so, I like so much of what he does, but there is a massive question mark there. But I also love, it's just another story of, we've seen this so often in the transfer portal. This is the good side of it. Going from the NEC to the A10 to the Big 12, man, that is gold. Good for you, Melvin Council. Excited to see you play in Lawrence next year.
I'd tack on the 3-point conversation, because one of their other additions that they brought in was Trey White from Illinois, who, guess what? Trey White does a lot of things really well, but he's not a good 3-point shooter either. He's not a high volume shooter. Last year was the most attempts he's ever had in a season per game, and it was 2.2, but he was 33%. And before that, he was 29%. And before that, he was 26%. Like, he's not a shooter. And then you have Council coming in, who's not a shooter. And it's just, and now granted, one of their other additions is Jaden Dawson from Loyola Chicago, and he shot 37% last year from three. So like they got some guys coming in who can shoot a little bit, but yeah, coming off what was a really rough year for Kansas offensively, in very much part due to their three-point shooting, it is a bit of a risk to be bringing in a couple of transfers who don't really shoot the rock all that well. But I like Melvin Council a lot. I like that he's here. I like that he's making this move. I'm very intrigued looking at, and I spoke about this earlier this week, Council coming in and their other additions, Trey White, etc. They have a lot of players at that 3-4 kind of a wing position, and yet they're strongly connected to Darrion Williams, who's withdrawn from the NBA draft. Williams is to be the best of the best. He'd be the best player on this roster, or at least the best of the transfers for sure, if he was able to land at Kansas. But somebody's going to get bumped. I don't know if it's Council. I don't know if it's somebody else. But if they do land Darrion Williams, I'll be interested to see if anything else changes with that Kansas roster, because that's a lot of cooks in that kitchen at the 3-4 position. So it'll be fun to see what happens there.
Yes, obviously Williams connected to other schools like NC State, Ohio State as well. We'll see where he ultimately lands. I already mentioned Kobe Knox, brother to Kevin and Carter. Cool stuff to have him as the third member of that family in the SEC. Andy, nobody really knew to report on players staying in the draft, but we will obviously have more to come. Next week is it, man, Wednesday night, as you said earlier. Now, we're going to switch from players to scheduling. Iowa State released their non-con schedule on Thursday, and Andy, they probably should have done some redacting because those bye games, woof. We'll explain it in just a second. As Andy just mentioned, we're going to be on Monday's show. It'll be stuff that we are pre-recording today, like right after we record this show. And we're going to be talking some scheduling news, including, Andy, something that you don't even know about unless you just saw it. Did you see it? Have you seen it?
Nope.
Because it involves you. Gonzaga hosting Creighton November 11th in Spokane. Big news, so we'll work that into our next show. Just some excitement to look forward to. We'll talk about that on Monday's episode. But right now, Andy, we're going to talk about Iowa State and their non-con schedule, which was released Thursday. Andy, because we're trying to be tight on time, I'm not going to walk all the way through the 13 regular season games and the 2 exhibition games, but we will have a couple takeaways. Let me give the big picture of it, and then I'll let you respond. We've got 7 bye games, Andy, 6 games against probably high major competition. The reason I say probably is because Iowa State will play Mississippi State in Sioux Falls, South Dakota on Monday, the November 10th at Sanford Pentagon, which had the biggest glow up of the COVID era. They will play Iowa in the annual Cyhawk game. They're hosting that one this year. And then they've got a road game at Purdue on December 6th. The other 3 probable big games there will be the Players Era Festival that they're competing in. We know all the teams involved in it, but we don't know the schedule yet. So that's why I say probably 3 other high majors. But Andy, the 2 biggest storylines are probably the fact that of these 7 bye games, all 7 of them are against teams that finished 270th or worst at KenPom last year. 6 of those 7 finished outside the top 300 at KenPom last year. Let's start there, and then we can look at the fun new exhibition stuff going on as well. Iowa State, 2 years ago, finished with a non-con schedule outside I think they're like 340th or something like that. Are they just going to continue to rely on beating up on these teams and then having their strong Big 12 schedule? Is that what we're doing here? Does it work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's worked, right? Like, I don't think we love it, but I don't see any reason why Iowa State or some of these other schools in the Big 12 would do anything differently. As much as we may agree with Brad Brownell calling them out publicly and trying to swing the narrative so people look down on these teams for scheduling like this, I don't think TJ Otzelberger gives one rat's behind if we don't like that he's scheduling his schedule this way, because it's not impacting them. They're not being viewed differently by the selection committee. And like, to Iowa State's credit, they come in and they do well in conference play. There are other Big 12 schools that schedule poorly in the non-conference or schedule similarly in the non-conference and then don't do all that well in conference play, and they don't make the tournament. Cough, cough, TCU, cough, cough. Like, there are other teams that do it too, but like, they're the counter example of, hey, if you don't put together, if TCU had played a stronger non-conference, won a few of those games, and then did okay in the Big 12, they might have snuck in. But when you, and a better example who's no longer in the Big 12 is Oklahoma, who 2 years in a row, their last year in the Big 12, their first year in the SEC, they did the same thing. I think in those 2 years combined, they lost one non-conference game. And last year they stumbled kind of badly in SEC play, but they still made the tournament. Now, granted, they won the battle for Atlantis, which included beating Arizona and Louisville, which were huge non-conference wins for them. But without those games, their non-conference wasn't very good. Now, this year, they've already scheduled Marquette and Gonzaga. They're very clearly looking to kind of change that narrative, which is good for them. And I think they deserve some praise and some flowers for that. But for Iowa State, they do well enough in conference play, like very well in conference play, that they don't really need these extra games. Like, they're going to go lose to Purdue most likely, because that's an incredibly tough game, but that's not going to hurt them at all. And if they beat Mississippi State and they do okay in the Players era, they'll come out of this non-conference with 2 losses, maybe 3, and then they just have to do good enough to finish 5th, 6th in the Big 12, and they're still going to get like a 5 seed. So like, there's no real incentive for them to change the way that they do this, and beating up on, like really bad teams. None of these teams are good, and none of these teams project to be way better next year. Like, they're going to play a bunch of really bad teams. They're going to beat all of them by 35 or 40 points. And again, I suspect that other Big 12 teams, when their schedules come out, are going to look kind of like this, and then they're going to play each other, and they're all going to have high net rankings, and they're all going to get a bunch of quad 1 opportunities. Like, it's just, until the system changes, the Big 12 is going to continue to do this. And as much as I don't really love it, because I want to see what Iowa State looks like against, a Big East school. I want to see them play, I'd rather see them play DePaul than see them play some of these teams. I'd rather see them pick any A-10 team, Loyola Chicago, pick any of them. I'd rather see them play those kind of opponents than, with no disrespect, Alcorn State or Long Beach State or Grambling. But there's no incentive for them to do that, and until there is. That's how this is going to continue to go.
Yeah, that's very true. Thankfully, we do get some of these fun games. Players era is loaded. Alabama, Auburn, Baylor, Creighton, Gonzaga, Houston, Kansas, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon, Rutgers, San Diego State, St. Joe's, fine, whatever, St. John, Syracuse, Tennessee, UNLV. So depending on who they play, get some more resume boosting stuff there. Love that it's a home and home with Purdue starting this year at Mackey, next year back at Hilton. They host the Cy-Hawk game this year. Iowa State and Iowa play every year. That'll be a lot of fun there to have the first iteration of that between Ben McCollum and TJ Otzelberger there. The Mississippi State game is just a one-off in South Dakota. It's so wild. But Andy, the other fun thing is, let's remember, we're going to start seeing all these great exhibition games now, which is a new wrinkle and a new super fun thing that just makes me all the more excited, because now we start getting games basically like as the NBA's kicking off. We get these exhibitions in mid to late October, right? At Creighton on October 17th, hosting Northwestern on October 26th. And what's cool about it is a lot of schools, and we'll talk about this again on the Monday show, a lot of schools are starting to do home and homes for these exhibition games, right? And so that's pretty cool here. The Northwestern one, for example, they will play in Evanston next year in October, this year in Ames. And so really cool stuff there, Andy. And I hope we start getting a lot of these televised and able to dive in on seeing them. Yeah,
the exhibition games being more of a spectacle event is a good change in college basketball. I get why some coaches don't love it. And the nice thing is right now they have the choice. If they really do not want people to watch their exhibition games because they're trying new things and stuff like that, they don't have to. But I'm glad more coaches are opting to do it. And we're getting these really fun ones, Kentucky, Georgetown. Like, there's a handful of others that are going to be so much fun to watch. And for Iowa State, again, to their credit, I suppose, they've scheduled 2 power conference teams, Creighton and Northwestern, for their exhibition games. So they'll get a little test there. Granted, it won't count against them, obviously, but it's still nice to see. I think these, again, like you said, it's getting college basketball to start competing with the NBA a little bit earlier. It can't hurt, right? So it's fun to have these games in October.
Andy, I do have one final question for you. What kind of animals behind do you think Otzelberger would give a rip about? Do you have any ideas there?
He strikes me as somebody who thinks that maybe it wouldn't take 100 humans to take down a gorilla. Like it might just be like 6 of him, and he thinks he could take them down himself.
He's so swole, man. He's buff. I love it. That's good.
Oh man, that's a good place to end, right? That's a good spot
Absolutely
to end the show. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. As a reminder, Isaac and I will be back with you all on Monday's show. We're going to record it very shortly after this, so any updates from the weekend we'll get into our show on Tuesday after Memorial Day. Again, thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a fantastic and safe holiday weekend. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. No more big news for Mark Pope with Lowe returning. Cheers to the McBruins, and until next time, peace out.